Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
We now turn to Claudia Sahm, without question my Economist of the Year for 2025. Her impact, her informed debate off the Sahm rule, of course, all of it, really focused on Jackson Hole. And she had a dinner at Jackson Hole, folks. I couldn't go to it because the Gulfstream was leaving Dodge. But Claudia Sahm with huge influence here in 2024. So I've got to go just to the ratios, and I look at the unemployment rate, 4.1%. The quiescence there. The revisions are a little more less enthusiastic than maybe what we saw 29 days ago. I'm just looking at, there's 896 statistics here. Manufacturing payrolls, negative 6,000 on the revision. Futures up 23 now, up 20. There's a little bit of a pullback in the equity markets. The VIX 22.08. Paul Sweeney always going to the 2-year yield. Paul, it comes in with a vengeance here, 4.12%.
Yeah, 4.12%. So again, the revisions, Tom, just from last month, change in non-farm payrolls, we were at 254, now revised down to 223. So a little bit weaker. But again, the headline today, 12,000 change in non-farm payrolls, consensus was 100,000. But again, the economists have been warning us that, we had the hurricanes, we've got some various strikes, and that's going to make this number, a little bit tough to decipher.
Yeah, and again, the net revision is a negative 112. So it's easy math. I take 12,000 positive, minus 112 is a negative 100,000. Claudia Sahm is going, why am I dealing with these financial media tools? She joins us right now. I mean, the value here, Claudia, is going to be, am I correct, massive revisions, 30, 60, even 90 days out?
Well, not even necessarily revisions. We could just see next month's number be a big, strong positive. Right, kind of unwinded. We had 2 major hurricanes, and we had a strike happening in the period that we're trying to measure jobs. There probably really was a hit to the jobs. Now, I will say I feel pretty vindicated. My Substack piece this week, that was the preview for this, was talking about this could be our negative payroll print, and it's not negative, so I was wrong on that one. But this was a low print, and the argument there is, even if the reality is we're kind of moving along at trend growth, which is a little under 200,000, like that was the pace before the pandemic. Well, you get 100,000 knocked off because of hurricanes and the strike, which was Governor Chris Waller's estimate of what that effect would be. And then you take into account that these are survey estimates. They are imprecise. The BLS tells us that always the confidence interval around an estimate is over 100,000 jobs. I mean, so we really, that number, that 12,000 we got today, that could be entirely consistent with a labor market that's growing at trend. And frankly, the unemployment rate staying low, that really goes in that court.
Let me get out.
This was more disruptions.
Yeah. Let me get out front. It's November 1, so it's not tacky. If I was saying she was our Economist of the Year in September, that would be tacky. But come on, November 1, Neil Dutta last year killed it with his optimism on 3% GDP. Claudia Sahm killed it this year, charging the debate here on our labor economy. She's a New Century Advisors. Claudia Sahm, see you next month. Joining us right now in studio, Ellen Zenter. She runs an Apple iPhone like no one. Do you need an iPhone 16 to go through the data faster now than you're normally going through?
This is my work phone. I am a Android Samsunger.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm that age, guys. Yeah. I'm forced to use an iPhone, and I only know how to check email.
Slow motion. Lisa Shallett has the iPhone 16 Pro. Ellen Zenter with us now, of course, with Morgan Stanley's Global Investment Office. You link consumption into labor like nobody I know. We had a buoyant consumption number. Are we taking it all from savings? And is it a fake labor economy?
No, not at all. I mean, look, new data that we got some weeks ago showed that it turns out we've spent a lot more than we thought, and savings was still higher because income numbers have just been revised up that much. So we still got income that's really robust. And I agree with Claudia that there is still a lot of disruption in these numbers, and this probably is consistent with a labor market growing at trend. And so we're still producing enough income to support consumption. I mean, look at consumption of lower income consumers. They are really going to love these lower gas prices. Mm-hmm. That frees up a lot of buying power as well.
You think so still?
Yeah. And wage growth is still healthy while inflation's coming down. So you got real wages that are positive. You got gas prices that are lower. And so you're getting some support coming back for lower income households as well.
So you mentioned the average hourly earnings on a year-over-year basis, 4%. That's pretty solid, right? I mean, give us a sense of historically where that number typically comes in.
Well, that number, so look, average hourly earnings in this report, it's a tiny sample. And it can be distorted from month to month depending on what hours worked do. So it's a calculation thing. And so 4% average hourly earnings on a year-over-year basis, you would say, gosh, that's a little bit higher than what would be consistent with the Fed's 2% goal. But you look at the employment cost index, which came out this week.
Okay.
That was Yellen's favorite measure. It continues to be the Fed's favorite measure.
I just looked at it moments ago.
That's a much more
talking,
comprehensive measure of wages and labor costs, and that is absolutely right now consistent with the Fed's 2% goal, which means that yes, it is healthy. So you're right, it's healthy, but it's not too healthy.
Isn't that amazing? She's
not
talking
too
about
fast.
it. I'm bringing it up while you're talking.
I know.
ECI from 5% into 3.9% year over year, nowhere near back to 2.75% sort of pre-pandemic as well. You know, we should talk to her about hourly earnings and the effect of the Yankees defense.
Oh boy.
I mean, it could
I
be
don't want
there.
to talk about the Yankees. I can't. I turned it off at the 8th inning on Monday. I turned it off in that last game. I was disgusted.
I was like, she was like third row with Dan Ives.
Ellen, what do you think this Federal Reserve should do with data like this here to any other data we've seen over the last several weeks as they get together next week?
Cut? Yeah.
How much?
Yeah, 25.
Okay.
Yeah, the economy's fine. And every time we get great data, the market wants to pressure it and say, well, the Fed doesn't need to do more here. But what is Chair Powell going to stress next week? Yeah, the economy's fine. The economy's great, so let's keep it there. Let's keep it there. And look, we've got ample room to cut. We don't know where neutral is, so we're going to baby step it there. I mean, they're in a great position having started the cutting cycle before the election. So they're in a great position if there's something that impacts the outlook for the economy. You can speed up rate cuts easily. You can pull rate cuts forward. I'm more in the camp of the risk of more than less from the Fed.
We are so thrilled, folks, of this Jobs Day coverage. You have Claudia Sahm with us, Constance Hunter before with EIU, and to have Dr. Sahm with us, and then Ellen Zenter, Ann Sonders is on deck looking at the equity market response, particularly out beyond the election. And then Ira Jersey will show up with us. We don't care at all what Ira thinks. All we want to do is talk about Aston Villa.
Right, exactly.
I thought it was all you wanted to do is have a man on the show because it's an all-woman. This is the all-woman morning.
You know, I don't think there's any. You know, we didn't do that.
Diversity,
it's not like
Tom.
some gender thing.
It's about diversity.
But exactly. You know. We it just worked out that way.
Yeah.
That's how I would say.
It just so happens all the women are the experts. It just worked out that way.
Exactly. On the economics.
It's tough as nails.
I know. Ellen, how about the consumer here? I mean, the consumer's employed, the consumer's getting wage gains, inflation's coming down. How do you feel about the U.S. consumer these days?
I think the U.S. consumer is I would say great, except that we still have a lot of our eggs in one basket. The wealthy consumer is still driving the majority of spending. But like I said, I'm encouraged at some of the developments for lower income groups that we're continuing to create jobs. Wages are growing. Inflation coming down.
This is important. We're going to stop here.
Gas prices
this is
are
really
coming down.
important, folks. We're going to take the Morgan Stanley continuum here right now. Let's take it into deciles, 10th of economy. The pandemic stereotype is the rich did well, no surprise there. And the lower 1 and 2 deciles were benefited because they were taking care of the rich. What does that decile construction look like into Q1 2025?
So, well, the hope is that the spending is diffused more across those deciles. So, before COVID, the top quintiles, so the top 2 deciles, represented about 40% of consumer spending. That bumped up to 45% of consumer spending, and it stayed there.
It's still there.
It's still there. The top 2 quintiles are more than 60% of consumer spending. And so what you want to see is we start to have some share come back to lower income households because they're contributing more broadly to consumer
But you
spending.
haven't seen this yet.
Haven't
Into
seen
the
it yet.
election, we
Haven't seen it yet. Right. And that's important, right? Into the election, yes, we haven't seen it.
Can
And
you
that's,
interpolate those decile analysis to say that the haves have a GDP of 4, 5, 6% real GDP, and the have-nots are near recession?
well, the have-nots have been in recession for a couple of years. I would say that they're emerging from that. What delayed them moving into recession was that incredible savings cushion that they received when we put in all the stimulus during COVID. Once they spent through that savings, but still were dealing with extraordinarily high rent inflation, food inflation, energy prices, inflation, that, and wage growth that was not outpacing inflation. That's when they were in recession. And you could follow companies that cater to them and the troubles that they were having. You could see it in the products consumers were buying. It was all being supported by the wealthy. We don't want to have our eggs in one basket, right? We want consumer spending to diffuse more broadly across households. We want all households to participate in the expansion. And so we do have some positive developments here. Wages are growing on an inflation-adjusted basis. The gas prices, all of that, right? They've still got very high cost of living, just in terms of housing costs.
Right.
As the Fed cuts rates, the market prices in the whole path of Fed cuts immediately when the Fed even hints at doing something. What doesn't move yet until they actually cut rates are the rates, say, that you pay on your credit card debt. And it is younger and lower income households that revolve a lot of that credit card debt. And so as the Fed continues to cut rates, that's going to take some pressure off of them as well.
We're talking Pennsylvania swing state. Gura's out there trying every beer today. Have you ever brown trout fished in Pennsylvania? Like real, it's like 19th century trout fishing. Have you ever done that?
Yeah. That's where we go for small stream fishing.
Small stream fishing.
6.5 foot rod is perfect. A flick of the wrist. It's very easy. Small streams. The brown trouts are fierce. They're fierce.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And compared to the sturgeon you're going after out west.
Yeah.
Compared to Patagonia.
These little guides, 10-inch, 12-inch little brown trout.
They're fierce.
They're fierce.
Really? I didn't
Fierce fighters.
Do you catch and release, or like we cooking at
All
the fire?
catch and release.
You're not cooking. Come
All
on,
catch
you're not,
and release.
You're not cooking up 3 of them. Surf. Ann Sonders would be She'd have the grill going.
Yeah.
Out there doing it.
Hey, maybe a brook trout here and
Where's
there.
your secret stream in Pennsylvania? Don't give this the name, but which beer is it
This
near?
makes no sense, Tom. You said the word secret. What's your secret stream? And it's no longer a secret anymore.
See? She's smart.
Ellen Zenter, thank you
knows
so
what
much
she's
at
doing.
Jobs Day. Let's move on to someone constructive, okay? Ellen Zenter with Morgan Stanley. This is great. Claudia Sahm, Ellen Zenter here with your job market. And equities improve, a perfect segue into Liz Ann Sonders. Wouldn't know a brown trout if it hit her over the head. Liz Ann, I look at futures up 30. I look at the Mag 7 hysteria. Liz Ann, I'm begging, get us into Q1 2025. What is our commitment to equities?
Well, I do worry a little bit about some froth in the market, although you've had some weakness that might ease a little bit of that, even outside of traditional investor sentiment measures. The consumer confidence report that came out, which was better in terms of headline confidence, also had a record high percentage of respondents saying they thought stock prices would be higher. So you see it in other behavioral data. So as I think between now and the first part of 2025, especially now with 25 estimates coming down for earnings, my biggest concern is just that backdrop of a little bit of frothy sentiment. All else equal, I think that means if you get any kind of negative catalyst, I don't know that today's weaker jobs report would be that because of what it infers for Fed policy. That to me is the background risk heading into 2025. To my
essay of the year 2 years ago, which was a brilliant effort by Lawrence McDonald on the wall of money that was out there in 2022. Liz Ann Sonders, is there a wall of money still out there trying to find a warm place?
Well, a lot of people point to the 6 trillion plus in money market funds as some wall that could come into the equity market. I'm not sure I agree with that assessment. I think that a lot of that money is pretty sticky. A lot of that money came in because of higher yields and out of riskier areas, whether it's on the fixed income side of things or in the equity side of things. And actually, if you look historically at the early part of cutting cycles, money actually continues to flow into money market funds, not in the opposite direction. So I don't view that as some imminent wall of money that could find its way into equities. I think that's probably a good chunk of that is pretty sticky.
Lizanne, what are you seeing from earnings so far this quarter? We started off strong with the big banks. We've had a bunch of tech earnings. What are you seeing, and what do you think the market needs to see from earnings?
Well, this is obviously a big week with 5 of the Magnificent Seven reporting. And in terms of Meta and Microsoft, at least, a quick glance, they didn't look bad. But at the expense side of things, I think it's the monetization story that really kicked in the second quarter. I think it's continued in the third quarter reporting season, which is the vast amount of expenses associated with AI, not just among the direct or indirect AI players, but across the spectrum of industries and sectors, and maybe the time gap between those investments and the monetization thereof, either from a revenue perspective or a productivity perspective. So I think we're continuing that theme, and it helps to explain some of the weakness like yesterday in tech.
We're going to go CFA Inside Baseball right now. Lizanne, I am apoplectic over the simplistic income statement analysis of the financial media. You got to pull in profit, distribution of profit, use of cash is the buzzword, and even into improved balance sheet dynamics. Are we slaves to a simple income statement analysis, or do you see more out there when you look at free cash flow growth, and what it means to a dominant balance sheet?
I do see more of that out there, especially as you move away from the dominant cap-weighted indexes like the S&P and the NASDAQ, and you go into some of the smaller cap indexes within, say, the Russell 2000. I think that's where you do see that factor differentiation that is more acute, whether it's high interest coverage versus low interest coverage, or zombie companies versus non-zombie companies, profitability type factors, to your point, Tom, high return on equity, strong free cash flow. And as you know, because we've talked about it a ton on this program, is I think that factor orientation, maybe not instead of a sector orientation, but as an overlay to that sector orientation, I think has been crucial, and I think will continue to be crucial. There's much more consistency in performance at the factor level than there is at the sector level.
What you just heard there, folks, is gospel. Ann Sonders, what are the factor constructive tone of Mag 7? Which factors benefit Mag 7?
Well, they are, the most part, very strong cash generation companies, and not just the Mag 7, but the mega cap tech related kind of names. They really took advantage of the rate backdrop that preceded the hiking cycle. And in most cases, many of these mega cap companies are earning more interest on their cash than they're paying interest on their debt. They're not at the mercy of where we sit in this cycle. The one thing I want to say, though, about the Mag 7 is the moniker was created when those were the 7 largest stocks in the S&P 500. Last year, they were not the 7 best performing stocks, but they were all very strong performers. That's not the case this year. They're not even the 7 largest stocks anymore. Tesla's not even in the top 10 anymore. You have to go down to ranking number 353 within the S&P 500 to capture all 7 of those names. If you look at the top 10 best performers in the S&P, only one of them is in the Magnificent Seven, and it's not even the best performer. The best performer is a utility. So I think we have to change our mindset. We get wrapped into these monikers and these groupings, even if they fail to represent what they did when the idea was first created. Berkshire Hathaway is now number 7. I haven't heard anybody suggesting that gets put into the Mag 7. So a broader thinking around market construction.
Lizanne, got to leave it there. We look forward to getting you on again soon. Lizanne Sonders, of course, at Conic with Charles Schwab.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Jessica Taylor, she is exquisite on Senate dynamics, and she publishes this morning. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. Love the Cook Political Report, telling people just shut up and subscribe. At the bottom of your note, you've got a bar chart of money made, money earned, money coming in versus vote. What's the correlation of money coming in? Nebraska, Osborne and Fisher. What's the correlation of money coming in to electoral outcome?
Well, I think that when you have a state like Nebraska that's very Republican, and you have Dan Osborne, who's an independent, trying to stress that he's not a Democrat, even though a lot of the outside money coming in to help him is from outside Democratic groups, he's been able to control the airwaves and set the narrative. We even see his latest ads running against Deb Fisher there in a state that Trump won by 20 points. Right. Making an overt appeal to Trump voters. You know, he's the most unique candidate of this cycle in the Nebraska. I did not expect on November 1st to be talking about Nebraska at all. You know, he's underscoring his blue collar roots. You know, he says that actually for him, the $174,000 salary of a senator would be a pay raise. So I think that's breaking through with a lot of people when we look at where the economy and everything is. So no one would know who he is if he was not able to get this money and to get his name out there. With
your Senate focus, I want to get you into the Amy Walter timeout chair. With your Senate focus, can you frame out probability of a Republican Trump sweep?
I mean, I think that if there is going to be a trifecta, it will be a Republican one. And that's simply because the Senate is overwhelmingly favored to go to Republicans. My final Senate analysis is publishing maybe momentarily on our website.
I see it. It's out.
Oh, it is all up. Okay. We predict that Republicans will pick up 2 to 5 seats, which gives them a majority of anywhere between 51 and 54 seats. You know, we came into this cycle with Democrats having to defend 23 seats to just 11 for Republicans. Republicans are going to pick up West Virginia. We know that. They're favored in Montana over Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown, and that gets them to 51. So it just means that, you know, do they add Ohio, where the race is neck and neck? Sherrod Brown could defy the odds and win there, even in a state that Trump carried twice by 8 points. Those other blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania all remain very close in toss-ups. So I just have a hard time seeing, you know, Democrats need to flip Nebraska, but even though, you know, Osborne says he wouldn't caucus with Democrats, Texas is the one. So there's just far more paths for Republicans. And then I think that if we're seeing Republicans win in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan Senate races, that means that Trump has won those probably. So that means that he's won the presidency. And I think also, you know, the House is very narrow. It's a true toss-up, but I think that probably as the presidency goes, as the House goes. So just because of the way the Senate math is, I have a hard time seeing Democrats winning the majority, and so that would preclude them from a trifecta, I think.
How about the House, Jessica? What races should we be looking at for the House of Representatives?
Yeah, so New York and California feature some of the top races. You know, those are not presidential battlegrounds, but Democrats suffered from lower turnout in the midterms. They're hoping that higher presidential turnout helps them. And there are some races that we've, you know, moved toward Democrats in California. But some Republicans are still hanging on. They're sort of running ahead of where Trump is in those states. There's a couple of open seats in Michigan's 7th district, for instance, the open seat that Alyssa Slotkin is leaving to run for Senate, when Tom Barrett has been raising a lot of money. You know, even though Democrats are spending heavily there, we see that race as slightly favoring him. And then, you know, if you're looking for early seats on election night to see how they go, there's a couple in Virginia, Virginia's 2nd and Virginia's 7th district that are also very tight that could give us an early indication of how the House is going.
Charlie Cook has an absolutely brilliant essay here, folks, out in the last couple days on the lack of landslides like we used to have, a dearth of landslides. He goes into, you know, item by item, the closeness of these races over the years. And as you know, Jessica, Charlie goes to the surprises. What's your biggest potential Senate surprise?
I think it's Texas.
Really, Cruz?
Yeah, I mean, Democrats have polling that shows this race tied. Other public polling does not. I still think those, Cruz had a very close race in 2018. He actually very much benefited from it being a midterm year where the Republican governor, Greg Abbott, had a far better turnout machine. I think that Cruz is very vulnerable on abortion. We saw Harris go there last week to sort of emphasize the state's very stringent abortion laws. In fact, while other states are able to have referendums to overturn them, Texas does not allow that. And, just this week, there was the story of a woman who was denied care after a miscarriage and she died. So I think those are very much in focus right now. And this is what if Democrats have a better night than expected, I think it probably has to do with, I'm cognizant of the fact that in 2022, the polling actually underestimated Democrats. And if Democrats have a better night overall, if Harris does, if someone like Colin Allred in Texas does, I think it's because the potency of abortion and the Dobbs issue after Roe fell is still very powerful and is driving a lot of voters, particularly female voters.
Jessica Taylor, thank you so much. The quick political report. Her focus on the U.S. Senate.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.
Tyr and I, he'll be on the Sikorsky out to, west of Pittsburgh, I might say, towards Indiana University of Pennsylvania. David Gura joins us now off of Wisconsin. He's the one who said to me, Tom, shut up, it's Arizona that matters. But now there'll be the trek east for David Gura. He will end up, Paul, election night, 16th Street, Philadelphia, Monk's Cafe.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Okay. This is they serve 400 beers, including Iron City beer. And David Gura will be there. I want to go to Connor Lamb.
Okay.
Conservative Democrat, ran against Fetterman, lost, out in the wilderness now of Democratic politics. What is Connor Lamb's best outcome in Pennsylvania Tuesday night?
That's a great question. I mean, I think this is going to be another tight race. And, I as you say, just came back from Wisconsin where the candidate whom I was following there, Tammy Baldwin, was talking about how she's in a 50-50 race. It's on a razor's edge. We've been talking about this as it's manifested itself in the polls over these last many months. But these candidates are living it. And this has been a long slog for them. But nobody's taking anything for granted here, I think, in these final few days. And something that stood out to me as I was there on the campaign trail is the attitude is every vote matters. And we've talked a lot about these kind of mythic undecided voters. That's not who these folks are focusing on now. It's getting people who have voted in the past but might not have last time or the time before that to recognize that it's important to get out there, mail that ballot in, or go to the polls in person.
I mean, I put boxes of Amazon outside my door last night so the kids wouldn't trick or treat there. I mean, Paul, and that's how antisocial I am. David Gura, does knocking on doors matter anymore?
I talked to a number of Tammy Baldwin's supporters, some of whom are in unions. They're being organized by their unions to go out. Maybe they don't even live in Wisconsin. They live in Minnesota or they live in Illinois. And the strategy has changed. It's not just kind of randomly knocking on doors. They're being targeted. Go to this Democrat's house. Go to this person who has voted for us in the past and might do it again. They're not doing the kind of cold knocking where it's going to be a Trump supporter who's going to shoo them off their front lawn. They're really, again, trying to get those who have been committed in the past and might be. But yes. And what the refrain was is explain why you're doing it, why this election's important, and seal the deal at the end. Try to get that person to say, you know what, great to talk to you. I'm going to show up at the polling place on Tuesday.
How touchy-feely? Paul, have they knocked on your door?
I haven't knocked on my door, thankfully. They're welcome to Jersey Shore anytime. David, if it is a real story to get the vote out, is there a feeling when you were in Wisconsin or that maybe one side's doing a better job than the other, has got a better on-the-ground apparatus?
We know more detail about how the Democrats, how the Harris campaign is approaching this. They're very forthright about how much money they have and how they're deploying that across the country. But the Trump campaign, in its memo to interested parties, as they put it, say that they have a very strong ground game. They're confident in how that's going to play out here over these next few days. But when you look at the sheer number of people who are out there on the payroll, it is the Harris campaign that has the edge. And you see that just in the way that the candidates are approaching this race. Yes, Kamala Harris is doing big events. Donald Trump is doing big events. But I think it's safe to say he is relying more on the spectacle and celebrity of these big big arena events than she is thinking that's going to trickle down to voters and get them animated.
David, as you know, all the experts are telling us this is a toss-up here. When you're on the streets in Wisconsin, does it feel like a toss-up? Does it feel that tight?
Yes, it feels extremely tight. You hear that from the candidates. You hear that from those who are organizing for them. You hear that from the voters themselves, who are fatigued, tired of all the ads that are everywhere, the ads that are on TV, the ads that they're seeing on the side of the road as well. I mean, every other billboard is a political ad, either from the candidates or one of these political groups. So they're inundated by it, but there is this broad recognition that in that state, in particular in Wisconsin, but also Pennsylvania, things have changed. The terrain has shifted. It's a closer race than it has been in the past.
David, Charlie Cook writing a gorgeous essay here like 2 days ago as well. He talks about the lack of landslides, and then he's got a 15-line paragraph going from Bush-Gore all the way through to Trump 2016, then on to Joe Biden. And he's talking about the narrowness, the reality of the narrowness. So Pennsylvania, is it going to be 10,000 votes?
I think it's going to be extremely close. And I know that there are some skeptics who say maybe the polling is wrong, or there's something about it that's not quite right. It's going to be a wider margin yet. What we do have in Pennsylvania, which is interesting, is some visibility into these early votes. You know who the state sent them out to and what parties they're affiliated with and which have come back. And so you see Democrats having an edge there. Fascinating, the story this morning. We've covered it. The Washington Post is covering it. New York Times covering it this morning as well, is the role of white women in the country broadly and in Pennsylvania in particular. It's a real difficulty for Democrats to claim them as supporters. And we look at the last election, Trump had them by a margin there. You look at the one before that, Hillary Clinton was the candidate and still wasn't able to secure them to the extent that Democrats wanted them and needed them to do. So that is a big push for the Harris campaign and for Democrats now, is to go after that 30% of the electorate, which is, frankly, a part of the electorate who does show up on election day, does get to the polls.
Do we know who the undecideds are? Like when you're on the streets in Wisconsin, does somebody have a sign around their neck? I'm an undecided.
That's brutal.
They're ordering the spotted cow at the bar. And, no, I mean, I think that we have some vague sense of who they are, but I think that they're a rarer bird than we've been led to believe. I think that, again, for many months, that's who we thought these campaigns were targeting. At this point in the game, I don't think they've given up on them, of course, but I think that there is just such strange mystique around what might be motivating somebody like that to sit on the sidelines as long as they have, that now it's like that's not where they're placing their efforts.
So do you anticipate at 11 o'clock at night, you're going to be on either your Dogfish Head Rodenbach Crimson Crew, or you're going to be looking at your Crooked Stave member Barry Syrah 2016 beer.
I need Tom as my producer.
With AMH. You're going to be on with AMH at 11 p.m. and we don't have a clue, right?
Well, look, I've been in touch with all of these election offices across Pennsylvania. I say, what's the plan going to be? Most of them have these online dashboards, and they say, come 9 o'clock Eastern time, Wall Street time, for those in the audience, they're going to begin putting those unofficial results up. We might have a good sense of where things are headed directionally that evening. They're not going to call, my bet is, they're not going to call that race for several days officially. There's going to be a lot of, very, very specific counting of votes, and then I think there is the specter of sort of legal action that might come in the days that follow.
$12. Chicken liver mousse with pickled mustard seeds, house-made jam, and a beer of your choice.
Nice.
I mean, that's living large.
I did have a Butterburger in Wisconsin and some cheese curds at Culver's.
What is a Butterburger?
Butterburger is a Culver's tradition. It is a buttered white bread bun with the burger. I was told to get it. It was.
You survived?
It slaked my hunger. I survived. I made it through the rest of it.
Well, now he's getting cheesesteaks. He's
Brooklyn diet. He hasn't had meats since Nixon was president.
No, exactly.
When in Rome.
Cheesesteaks in Philly.
Safe travel. Seriously,
Thank you very much.
Go across
I know we'll be in touch. Yeah. Down to Philadelphia, and we're going to spend Monday and Tuesday in those, fabled suburbs, Bucks County, and the lot. Where
15 seconds. 6 weeks ago, you said Arizona matters. Still matters?
Still matters, but now I have to say selfishly, Pennsylvania's the state to watch.
Okay.
Exactly.
I'll be watching it.
Look for David, Monk's Cafe, Philadelphia, election at night. Probably, I assume Barr will go down.
I can put it on your card, right, Tom?
Of course.
No, it's on Redo. Keeper of the Amex, is in charge of all of Monk's Cafe receipts.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.